And here we go. Okay, so thank you for everyone who's joining us today, both those participating and listening in on the call, and thank you all to the panelists for joining us as well. For those who do not know me, my name is Connor Jones. I think I've probably talked to all of the panelists at some point, but nice to put a face to the names. I'm the program coordinator for the Buck-I-SERV program here at Ohio State. I primarily work with our student trip leaders as well as our student Buck-I-SERV board. And so I'm doing a lot of work with that kind of like logistical trip management piece. I'm also joined by my supervisor, the senior coordinator for Buck-I-SERV, Rebecca Delo. Rebecca works with a lot of our travel components, as well as our trip advisors and a trillion other things all the time. So thank you all for joining us today. It's really nice to have you all here. So I'll go around and introduce the panelists. We'll have some time at this once we kind of get in the flow of everything for you all to do some more like thorough introductions, a little more about yourself, and as well as a little more about kind of the work that you do. But today, for those who are attending, we're joined by Vince Hungate from Medici Project, Jeff Abel from Special Olympics Baltimore, and Randy Reynolds from Tampa Bay Aquatic Preserves, often known as Florida's Aquatic Preserves. So thank you all for joining us. It's great to have 3 different community partners who work with really different social issues and kind of hearing that diversity of experience that's going on right now. So just a brief thing on how the webinars will work. So anyone who's attending the webinar may have noticed the chat function is turned off. We just figured that'll make the flow a lot easier. But you can put any questions you have in the Q&A. We'll get to some at the end. Rebecca will be monitoring the Q&A mostly, and then we will get to some of the questions at the end for everyone to answer. But we'll answer any little ones that we can get to during the course of the session as well. Microphones and video, except for our panelists, are also turned off. So anyone who's participating and is worried oh, I don't want to get caught doing something embarrassing, don't worry, we can't see you. You won't be in the recording. So not a problem there. And then just to keep flow for the panelists, I'll direct questions to you one at a time and just be kind of calling on you and kind of give you all the opportunity to speak to all of them. So that way we know we're not trying to oh, are you going, or am I going, or are you going, that kind of thing. It's just to make sure we have a smooth flow for that. And again, we are recording this, so feel free to share it out. We'll post it on our website afterward, and you can share it out with anyone who wasn't able to make it today. But first off, I wanted to start with a little poll. So just a couple quick questions about kind of what your connection is to Buck-I-SERV, as well as what are you most interested in learning about today. So I'm going to launch the polling on that. So if you could just go ahead and vote on that poll. Okay, 15 more seconds-ish. Okay, so I'm going to end the polling there. I'm going to share the results out. So what we're seeing now are, from people who are finding their connection most relevant, so we have former student trip participants and leaders in here, as well as former staff and trip advisors, interested future staff trip advisors, and some joining from elsewhere as well. And the things that seem that most people are interested in, especially, is how community partners are dealing with the COVID-19 pandemic, and as well as socially distant virtual service opportunities with community partners. So cool, we're gonna hopefully get to all of that today. And so with that said, we'll kind of just launch into the beginning of it. So I wanted to give you all a chance to speak a little about your organization, kind of the work that you do, and then also kind of how you've been impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic. So just kind of what your current experience is, and what that looks like. So Vince, would you mind starting us off?
Yeah, thanks, Connor. I'm Vince Hungate with Medici Project out of Atlanta, Georgia. And what we do is that we do service learning trips with ASB partners in Atlanta, New York City, and also in Nashville. We focus on 3 particular areas. Urban initiatives is one of them. We do human trafficking trips where we engage students and leaders involved in the aspect of human trafficking with basically hands-on experiences, a lot of not hands-on because of just just things being so sensitive when you're dealing with that kind of an issue. And also juvenile justice, where we take, and matter of fact, you guys have been our only team. Matter of fact, we developed this with you, where we trained your leaders and actually take them into juvenile detention centers and prisons, and they do leadership and life skill development within those in the Atlanta area. So that's what we do. How we've been impacted is that everything for us, we have had, I think it's about a dozen trips canceled. Matter of fact, you guys were with us in Nashville right when not only the tornado hit, but also when you got the news on Thursday that school was totally shut down. And so for us, all of our trips have been shut down all the way through to the fall. And so presently, we're keeping in contact with our partners that are in these areas and what's going on. But right now, we're just making contact with individuals like you, planning for the future. And even though we don't know what we're planning for, it's like, this is plan number 1 through plan number 20. And so that's probably what we're doing on our end because of what we do. So thank you for giving me an opportunity.
Thanks for sharing, Vince. Jeff, do you want to go next?
Sure. Hi, everyone. So I'm Jeff Abel. I am Vice President for Programs at Special Olympics Maryland, and we serve currently 8,117 athletes with intellectual disabilities across the state. Our Buck-I-SERV group typically works with our Baltimore City program in our program to engage individuals with intellectual disabilities in sport, fitness, competition, and training. We also run adapted physical education for Baltimore City Public Schools. And so our Buck-I-SERV students would typically be this week working with our Baltimore City Spring Games, which engages about 1,000 athletes ages kind of first grade through 21 in a track and field meet, different days, different ages. So that would have been a lot of fun. COVID-19 for us has been a big bummer. Like for everybody else, all of our programs are canceled in person. So, there's no summer games, no spring games. All of our sport seasons have been awash since March, so no basketball either. And based on kind of our global organization, we're shut down through June 30th in person, but we've been able to reframe everything to online sport fitness programming through a program called Virtual Movement that Special Olympics Maryland has. So it's anything from group fitness classes that we offer over Zoom to club quarantine, where we'll get about 150 athletes on a dance party on a Saturday night. One of the things that's big for us, in addition to losing that sport competition, our athletes with disabilities also lose that socialization that comes with it. Social isolation is kind of a year-round thing for people with intellectual disabilities, and Special Olympics tries to step in and support there. So, lots of online stuff going on, a lot of fun, and we can't wait to, get back on the golf course this summer, this fall for our regularly scheduled programs.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing, Jeff.
Yeah.
All right, Randy.
Yeah, my name is Randy Reynolds. I'm an oceanographer, and I manage the aquatic preserves around Tampa Bay area for the state of Florida. Submerged land in the state of Florida is really, unless otherwise has been conveyed to other ownerships, is owned by the people of the state of Florida. So we're representing the governor and cabinet as the stewards of the submerged lands, the public lands in Florida. And so we're managing habitat like seagrass beds and hard bottom habitat that has corals and things around Tampa Bay. We're also managing a number of islands and a freshwater swamp and some other areas that are connected with the aquatic preserves. And so typically when Ohio State groups come down here, they're usually helping us on islands, but we have other projects as well. And I know Pamela Thomas is one of the attendees, and she could probably almost tell you about as much about our program as I can, because she's brought a number of groups down here. We're, of course, like everybody else, kind of compromising what we can do, but we also were looking at, opportunities to go in new directions as far as education and outreach, because education and outreach is a big part of our mission, in addition to direct management of submerged resources. So we're looking at we're gearing up a virtual reality program, and it was really based a lot on headsets and all for visitors to events. But we've been in the back of our minds thinking about things like projection domes and things like that don't require people to wear headsets. So we're now really looking at those things. So we don't have to worry as much about, sterile headsets and things. So it has changed how we do things. May is usually one of our biggest months for the field because we're switching from island work. And normally we have an Ohio State group here actually this week in May. The March group that came in helped us to get up to speed on maintaining our habitat restoration sites on islands. So we're in good shape there going into the rainy season, which causes everything to grow. And I think we'll be in good shape with the islands until the fall when we start to work on islands again when the weather starts cooling down, and hopefully have a group here in December like we often do from Ohio State. We had a Maymester group that normally comes down here later in May from UNC Chapel Hill, and we talked to people from Ohio State before about maybe doing a Maymester in the future because it's a little more academic than the purely volunteer groups for majors. But we're certainly also I teach college courses at night occasionally, and so I had to switch a biology course to the online format, so I know exactly what you're dealing with in the universities. And actually, some ways it's gone hand in hand with our aquatic preserves interns that we have from local universities because we've had to switch some of their activities to online activities. We can't do a lot of the field work online, but we also teach them practical things like tying knots and GIS and stuff like that. And so we're able to do a lot of that online. And we're looking at how we can create some resilience in our program for our partnerships with universities and interns and all by having online things that can not replace but substitute temporarily at least for some of the activities we'd rather they do in the field. So overall, I think we're faring well. We miss our Buckeye groups, our Buck-I-SERV groups, and our manners groups from Ohio State, but we're doing pretty well. I think we'll be ready to hit the ground running when we can do a lot more field work.
Awesome. Well, thank you all for sharing. It seems like, even despite the differences in the work that you all do, like a lot of those same kind of problems are popping up and trying to find the similar solutions for how do you do all of this virtually. Okay, so now we're going to move into some prepared questions. So again, we'll still be taking questions in the Q&A as we go through. So feel free if anyone has any other questions to add those in there. Some of them may get answered right here though. So the first question I had for you all, what's been the biggest challenge you faced when you're doing your community work during this pandemic? And how has that challenge changed, eased up, gotten more difficult as this has sort of progressed? So like, what's the biggest challenge you're facing and how is it sort of changing? And Randy, if you want to start us off here.
Okay. I think our biggest challenge is because we work in vehicles and boats going in the field, and we often take our interns with us and staff. Right now, we can still go in the field, but we can't ride in vehicles together. So everybody would have to meet at the boat ramp, taking separate vehicles. And sometimes it's a considerable distance to a boat ramp because we operate all around Tampa Bay. And then once in boats, it's kind of hard to stay 6 feet apart if you have very many people. And actually 6 feet we consider to be kind of not necessarily based in what's what's safe or not. That's just a kind of a community guideline. So we're really shut down a lot on what we do right now. We're talking about how we can, as we ramp back up, maybe take 2 boats, and we have 1 boat that has 2 levels we can space people out on, and just everybody still go to the boat ramp. But we really, this is a busy time for field work because we're transitioning from our island work to our in the water work, monitoring coral areas and stuff. And so it's kind of an important month for us. And from the early part of the month to the later part of the month. And our biggest challenge is trying to figure out how to continue the stuff that is seasonal, like our monitoring that we really want to get done seasonally to add to an ongoing database. And still, we can get out in the field with a few people, but it's really a lot easier if we have students helping us. And it also is better for the students to get out and see how we do these things. So that's our biggest challenge is trying to come up with the logistics of how we can do at least a minimal amount of field work because it's really important to not have any gaps in some of those databases.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing, Randy. Jeff, how about you?
So I think the two big challenges for us, obviously, if we look at our Baltimore City program, as we move programming online, a lot of the athletes and families that we would like to reach don't necessarily have the access to online capabilities, reliable internet, computers at home, and that kind of stuff. And so, just kind of rehabbing to make printed resources that we can mail out and work within Baltimore City Public Schools and the kind of the structures that they have in place to make sure that we can get training materials to our students, student athletes. And I think the last one, obviously, I'll say it, is funding. It's tough when you don't have events and stuff, and we can't have our torch run and gala and all that kind of stuff. Our fundraisers are important for nonprofits, and in a time when we don't have that, and when we want to be respectful of everyone's kind of financial circumstances, we don't want to put out a lot of asks, but we also need to be able to, keep the lights on and keep athletes engaged.
Awesome. Thanks so much. All right, Vince.
With us, our community partners that we partner with everywhere is dealing with a real lack of just hands-on volunteers. So for us, we're able, for a lot of, probably over 100 different organizations between 3 cities, bring in armies of volunteers, of students, of civic groups, all kinds of things like that. What we're seeing with our organizations that we partner with is that some of their programming is having to go online, but those who are more in the benevolent field of feeding, taking care of actual physical needs of people, especially those experiencing homelessness, that has been a real challenge because a lot of individuals on the outside do not want the direct contact, because a lot of those that are being served are, they don't have the protective gear. They don't have masks. It's very difficult for homeless people to get a hold of masks unless it's given to them by an organization. And they're having to be very sensitive, depending on what city. Matter of fact, one of our organizations in New York City had the police called. They do a mobile feeding, and literally the lines have been 2 blocks long. And the reason why it's that long is because they've had to come out and do the best that they could in doing social distancing chalk marks. But when you're dealing with individuals in homelessness that are dealing with sometimes mental illness and other things, they do not adhere to the rules that many of us would. And so what has happened in that scenario is that the police in some situations have been very understanding and understanding who the clientele is and who's being served, and allowing some of those rules to be broken, individually, and that's less than like 5% that do that. But depending on, the law enforcement that shows up depends upon how they treat and what they do, with the organizations. And so far, a lot of our organizations have had a lot of support because they understand the needs that aren't being met on streets, and they're being very supportive of what needs to be done. But what's happening is that local organizations who are used to having volunteer support, that volunteer support has dropped, 80 to 90%. And some of that has to do with those that are intricately involved. And so maybe they're volunteering 2 or 3 times a week. Those are the ones that they're allowing to stay in a volunteer mode. But the other ones, because of where they're coming from and all, that they've been, very protective of even their clientele. If it is a homeless shelter that is actually housing men or women or children, allowing outsiders to be able to come in. So they've been very protective of who they're able to test, who they're able to allow to come in. Our situations in the juvenile detention center has been totally shut down except for, government workers and those that are in that kind of situation. And so for us, we have just seen, and it's understandable, but sort of like a volunteer stiff arm of, listen, we want you to come, but you can't come until this time because of the protection of you and the protection of our, of our clientele. But ground zero is in New York City. That is where the most stringent rules, regulations, different things are happening and occurring. It's not like there's a line trying to get into New York City either to help. And so a lot of the local community is having to band together, which I believe has been an amazing thing, watching local communities, be aware of what's going on and actually stepping up to the plate, where before maybe they were so busy in their career or in their life that they didn't have the bandwidth to be able to serve. So those are some of the things that we have been seeing, either online or those that have been very involved with different things, being able to continue to be involved in all. But a little different rules in New York City than we've experienced in Nashville and in Atlanta because of where they are and so many people being exposed to the virus. So I hope that helps.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you all so much for sharing. And I know those challenges are difficult, but we really appreciate the work that you all do and continuing to tackle them head on. Thinking about that and what that looks like as you continue to tackle these challenges, looking forward, what are you going to need to be able to do to move forward? And what can we, as Buck-I-SERV or our student participants, or just getting the word out of Ohio State or whatever that may look like, how can we support you from like a virtual social distance until we get closer to the time where we're actually able to resend those groups? And what would that maybe effectively look like, if you have anything for that? Jeff, do you want to start us off?
Yeah, I think for Special Olympics, and the cool thing is, obviously I'm from Special Olympics Maryland, but Special Olympics Ohio is fantastic and can't say enough good things about them. So, whether you're getting involved in what we're doing online or looking up what Special Olympics Ohio does, I would definitely recommend that. We are always, for our online content, if you search Special Olympics Maryland Virtual Movement, join the group on Facebook or check out our Instagram or Twitter. Some of the stuff that we were putting in place, we were thinking, all right, this will keep us going for 2 or 3 weeks, and then we'll be back and basketball will happen and it'll all be good. And then a week or two ago, the reality set in of oh, this is what we're doing until August probably. So we are always looking for more content. If you have students who are interested in leading fitness classes, that would be great. Even just joining one of the fitness classes as a participant, you're welcome to do that. It's great for our athletes to see new faces and have that interaction. We've started an online cooking show called Quarantine Cuisine. So if you have a recipe that you like cooking and want to channel your inner, Food Network star, you're definitely welcome to do that. But, I would say if you have an idea for content, reach out to me, join our virtual page, and we can definitely put you to good use.
Cool. Thanks, Jeff. Vince, you want to go now?
Yeah. Communication is a big thing that is lacking for us right now because just the size of our organization. So if there's anyone out there that would be interested in partnering with us and even keeping in contact with our partners, which is, close to 100 in the 3 cities, maybe finding out what their needs are and how we could serve them better. So research for us, communication, being a go-between and being able to call those organizations. And we have internal stuff that we're dealing with in the office that we're not able to, to get to yet because of all of that. So, content and just being able to communicate what organizations are going through, and maybe in these cities, how maybe some, just by that communication, Buck-I-SERV students who live in those cities could be involved that they didn't even know was a need, but being able to get that communication out and working with us behind the scenes virtually to be able to get that information would be incredible, for us.
Awesome. Thanks, Vince. How about you, Randy?
Well, a few things come to mind. It kind of strikes me as we've been working on how to reach out to people and continue our education outreach efforts about our submerged lands and the resources here, because a lot of these habitats all these habitats we manage are downstream from people's storm drains in their suburban neighborhoods and things. So everybody, has an impact on the aquatic preserves, whether they feel that connection or not. So we on an ongoing basis, we're trying to help people who would never set foot in the bay maybe to understand their connection and be able to look around and say, wow, we didn't know there were corals at Tampa Bay, or these vast seagrass beds with basically at the end of May, we're going to have underwater wildflowers from the seagrass blooms, and people don't even know that. And so it strikes me that the same things that we've talked about in the past for giving better access to people who maybe have physical challenges or something like that to see the aquatic preserve resources and appreciate them, are also things that we should be working on for the general public. And a lot of people, we have a captive audience sometimes with people at home right now. We're looking at some innovative things, approaches right now to help people use their time to learn more about aquatic preserves and the resources that they are really, the ecosystem they're a part of, whether they realize it or not. So anything that, I know we've had students from Ohio State who were connected with the VR lab there, virtual reality lab and things. And if there are students or faculty who want to explore new ways of, and we can take virtual reality content, we have the cameras and all to do that in the field, but to explore new ways of doing virtual tours and things, those are kind of exciting prospects that we've been looking into in-house, but we certainly welcome outside expertise. Another thing is, we've talked about in the past Maymesters and things. We do that with UNC, and that goes beyond just volunteering to, combining a classroom experience with a field experience. If there are people that wanted to explore that, Ohio State, that'd be a way to kind of produce a more academic experience. We try to, give practical experience to students who work with us, like the use of our survey grade GPSs and looking at GIS mapping applications on the fields as a service learning component. But it might be nice to take that up a notch and explore the idea of these classroom field opportunities like a Maymester type experience. And the third thing that I was thinking of was we have, as you I'm sure are aware, a very active Ohio State alumnus community around here. And, we're always looking at ways to involve them more with our program, both because they have so many people involved that just getting word out about what we do through any kind of online seminar or something with the alumni is a good way to reach into the community, people we might not normally reach at a, say, an Earth Day event or something like that with our exhibits. And we've even, talked about how with almost every Buck-I-SERV group, there's usually one or two students who are majoring in the field that we work in. And we've talked about some way of trying to make it possible, either through accommodations with alumni or something like that, to make it possible for students to come down here and say, I want to explore this more as far as its relation to my career aspirations, to be able to maybe do a summer internship or something like that, and not break the bank for them to do that. So those are three things that I could think of that we could be talking about at least. And I always say the time to plan is when you can't actually do stuff. That's the time to be planning for when you can. And so this seems like, we found a lot of great opportunities with a lot of our projects to firm up plans and things like that during this time. And so I think any kind of conversation with Ohio State on those things I've mentioned would be welcome.
Awesome. Thank you all for sharing, and thank you all for just a variety of different ideas there, and some that I hadn't even considered before. Just for those who are participating in the call, and I guess panelists as well, as we are looking at potentially talking to some more community partners and trying to centralize a lot of this in one place so the students have easier access to it and can go on and find those opportunities. So that's a project that we have in the works. So just wanted to let everybody know about that as well. Okay, so our Buck-I-SERV's motto is travel, learn, serve. And I think Rebecca said it best when we can't travel right now, but we can still learn and serve. So from our panelists, has there been a specific resource, whether that's an article about the social issue you're working with, or a book, or a podcast, or some other resource that you found really helpful to kind of focus your work during this time? It doesn't even necessarily have to be specifically on your social issue. If you just found it useful to help you continue to do the work that you do, that's great too. Randy, did you have anything for that?
I can't put my finger on a specific article, but certainly there's been a proliferation of articles about online presence and also managing staff. I'm lucky because I have really good staff. The people Pamela knows, Sarah and Liz, who work for me, are just, I mean, they have not missed a beat. If anything, they're more productive now. And we have a lot of things like development of management plans and all that we can do in place of going in the field as much as we normally would this time of year. So we haven't been unproductive. I saw even an article yesterday. I can't remember. I've been saving all these and posting them on my college account here with other professors, but one yesterday on how to create effective internships from a distance, you know, because a lot of programs like ours are having to do a lot more stuff remotely than face-to-face like we normally would. So I wouldn't say that there's one particular article, but there are little parts of a lot of articles online that I've been kind of collecting up that seem to just, there's a little good idea here and there, and some is not anything new, but it's common sense. Since I had to change my teaching to switch in mid-semester to an online college course, I actually took I guess about a 15 to 20 hour class to be certified to teach online, just suddenly, spur of the moment, within a couple of weeks. And that kind of gave me some insights. It was nothing new, but it was just things like, I really should do more of this and more of that. So I wouldn't say there's any one thing, but it's just been kind of a great time to really think about what we do and why, and how resilient our program is, especially as far as reaching out to students and to the public.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing, Randy. Jeff, you want to go next?
Sure. Two that I've really enjoyed. So our organization has started using the book, The Four Disciplines of Execution, which is kind of a management and work process where organizations focus on the most important thing. And they talk about identifying what is your wildly important goal. The idea that if nothing else gets done, this thing has to get done in order for the organization to be successful. And I think that has been really helpful for us as we are not in a business as usual time frame, right? Or place and time. So that's been really good for our organization to look at. And then personally, if anybody's into podcasts, Julie Foudy, a soccer player, was on the 99ers U.S. Women's National Team. Fantastic podcast called Laughter Permitted, where she talks to professional athletes, a lot of female athletes, and just about their work. And so she did one with Dr. Colleen Hacker, who was a sports psychologist for U.S. Women's National Team, currently sports psychologist for the U.S. Women's Hockey Team, and just a fantastic podcast about reframing mentality, how to stay connected with other people. It has certainly a sports focus, so I think helpful for athletes, but can be repurposed for anybody.
Great. Thanks, Jeff. All right, Vince?
You know, because we're such a top-heavy, hands-on organization, probably 90% of what we do is actually engaging people in hands-on service and being involved with them in that process. We have actually realized how much of a gap we have with technology, and because we've never really needed it. Well, now we're in this place where we're realizing that. So for us, the learning has come into getting engaged with experts and allowing them to see what we're lacking and to be able to make suggestions based upon an outside eye to what we need in the future. And so there's been a lot of just one-on-one learning and like Zoom calls of just saying, hey, you know, we basically had shut down, you know, so what would keep us from shutting down in the future? And so for us, a learning has not been on like a podcast or a book. It's actually been in that engagement with experts in the field, giving their input and looking from the outside in to give suggestions on where we could go from here to actually engage in service more online. And that's why I love what Jeff was talking about, what their organization is doing in Baltimore. I never would have thought of those things. online, exercising and workouts and all these kinds of things. I never would have thought about that kind of stuff. So having outside voices to be able to speak in and say, listen, have you thought about this? And getting with those IT experts and heads of IT, departments and stuff in companies to be able to give that insight and to be able to start over the next 12 months working in that direction to start improving that and adding that to, what we do. So it becomes more of even a holistic experience and a better experience even before when students come to us, and how that can continue after they leave. So those are some of the things that we're just sort of processing and trying to think through and bite. You don't eat an elephant at one time. It's one bite at a time. So what we're trying to do is how can we eat that elephant over the period of the next 12 to 24 months to get us in a place where, heaven forbid we ever have to, go through this again. But if we did, what would this look like? Or if it was something else different. So I hope that helps.
Yeah, definitely. And thank you all for sharing kind of some different engagement resources and strategies there. It's nice to think about it, like you said, Vince, in a variety of different ways, and hearing from others and finding their considerations important as well. Okay, so the last question I have for you all that's prepared, we have a couple that looks like in the Q&A as well. So on a kind of more positive, hopeful note, what are maybe some little victories or some successes you found during this time of rapid change? Or what are maybe some stories you've heard that have been supportive of or uplifting or have been a part of your organization and provided you with that? Jeff, do you want to start us off?
Sure. I think the community support for Special Olympics has not stopped. And actually we found, because a lot more people have a lot more time on their hands, that people are looking to get engaged, and to the point where, in addition, with all of our online stuff, we've started a sports talk show where we'll invite, professional athletes, coaches, and anybody like that to get involved. And I've been so impressed by the sports community saying, yeah, we'll do this for Special Olympics Maryland. So we had Kevin Nagandi from ESPN be interviewed by our athletes. We had Coach Mark Turgeon, the basketball coach at that other Big Ten school that we have here in Maryland. We had Kimmy Meisner, who was a U.S. Olympic figure skater, Gabby Dabrowski, a tennis player who's won Grand Slam championships. So all interviewed by athletes. And I think it's just a really cool way for our athletes with disabilities to be engaged with the larger sport community, and to see that, professional athletes, people with really well-known names, are willing to take an hour of their time to say, no, we want to make sure that Special Olympics Maryland athletes are doing okay, answer their questions, and just be accessible to them. So that was a big win for us.
Awesome. That's great to hear, Jeff. Vince, do you want to go?
A big win for us is just the fact of people reaching out and saying, hey, when your cities open up, we want to be there. We want to be able to come in. We want to be able to engage immediately. We don't want to wait. And so actually for us, that's a first time for us, because usually they have designated slots in a year that they have. And now they are really stepping up to the plate and saying, hey, we want to be, engaged even before then. And so for us, just the aspect of the heart of people. And one of the exciting things for us is that getting correspondence from the organizations we serve saying, hey, we just want you to know how much we miss you. And how much, students like Ohio State and Buck-I-SERV have meant to other organizations that sometimes they're so busy, they're not able to really share or think about the importance of people coming in. And so just them saying, hey, we hate that Buck-I-SERV wasn't here this week, and we were all sitting around thinking what we could have done more, or what we could offer more because we have more hands and more feet. That was super encouraging. And for us, we're a smaller organization. We're a small, smaller, lower end of mid-size, nonprofit. And so for us, a very encouraging thing is that we haven't suffered financially. Even though we've had teams not show up and stuff, we've been able to, our partner base has stepped up and, have been super generous during this time, which has been fascinating to us because there are over 22 million people on unemployment. And so how does that happen in a time like this? And it just shows that, that people in America are amazing people and they do step up, no matter where we're at, whether we're in Florida, working in the area of that and preservation and all, or if we're in Baltimore or we're in Atlanta. And it's been really neat seeing people come in. So for us, those have been, a couple of things that has been super encouraging during this time, with us.
Great to hear, Vince. And how about you, Randy?
Well, a couple things come to mind. I think there's a general kind of revelation with this virus episode that we can't necessarily take things for granted. And hopefully, I know a lot of people in Florida appreciate, especially now, when they can get outdoors and get out into. And we know from research in recent years that just getting out into green space is important for child development, important for people's mental well-being. And so I think that kind of this kind of really hits home with this, everybody being isolated and all that having these habitats. I mean, and in Florida, they're not distant from urban areas; they're right in our backyard, and that we have those, and it's important for us to make sure that they're in good shape. So I think that there's a good realization there, and also I've let's see, what was the other point I was going to make here? Also as I have gotten older and had more experience in my career, I realized that we live in a culture where a lot of times accomplishments are just how many things you can check off a list. But as I've gotten older, I've realized that if to use a cliche, if it's worth doing, it's worth doing right. And we really want to try to do things well. And so even though we had kind of a flurry of bureaucratic things originally when we first started transitioning to this isolation, it's actually taken some things off our plate temporarily. And so we've been able to possibly give more attention to some of the things like this idea of using technology more in education and outreach. I mean, for years, we tend to preach to the Earth Day event crowd and stuff like that, and they attend and they tell us they appreciate what we're doing, but they already know what we're talking about. And so we've been looking for ways to reach into those suburban neighborhoods and other areas where people have a direct hydrological, at least, connection to the aquatic preserves, but they may not realize it. And their day-to-day decisions often are seen in what we do downstream. So I think we've really it's kind of put the idea of exploring technological outreach and virtual outreach on the front burner for us. And so I won't say it's completely helped us to reprioritize things, but it really has helped us to think about some things that we should have been thinking more about in the past, and we're starting to think about. It's kind of helped us to I think plan to do a more thorough job on some of those things like outreach vehicles and things like that.
Awesome. Thank you all so much for sharing. It's great to hear a lot of those stories and how you're putting those things to good use to find new ways to continue to innovate when it comes to this sort of work. So that's awesome. Thank you. All right, so that is it for our prepared questions. I see there's a couple of questions in the Q&A. Rebecca, you've been monitoring those, and are there any you think would be worth throwing out to the group?
Yes, I think both of the questions that I see here we've kind of answered. I will ask one. Vince, maybe you kind of started to touch on this, and I'll throw it to you first. But the question is, do you believe that your organization is in a better place for having gone through these current challenges since you've had to develop these new strategies of doing things? Or do you think that because of the economic impact or some of the other things that it will take a while to come out of, do you think maybe you're going to come out of this in maybe some worse way than before? You kind of started to touch on that in one of your previous answers. You want to try to tackle that one?
Yeah. Well, like I said earlier about looking at things that we didn't know was huge when it came to IT. And so I'm what you call a low-tech redneck. And so I'm not even a high-tech redneck. And so what I mean by that is most of our correspondence has always been email, text, whatever, but we never thought about this. What would training look like on Zoom? Or what would a webinar look like to prepare people when they came to serve with us and all? So for us personally, that, knowing now what we didn't know before, and we had a blind spot because we sort of had, it's sort of like a horse, a racehorse. You have those blinders on and you're just doing what's in front of you. And I think we're all guilty to that to some degree. But being able to have those blinders taken off and to be able to be open to what you may be lacking, in that area. And then figuring out from there, okay, some of those things take financial means. So how are we then going to implement it in an ongoing budget? Or who are we going to talk to, in those areas and all? But see, for us, I think this, a lot of people don't know that, when we moved to Atlanta in 95, we were social entrepreneurs. And what that means is that we've started 5 nonprofits in the city of Atlanta in different areas. And Medici Project is one of 5, and it's one of 2 that we're managing right now and overseeing with 2 different boards. But on top of that, we're also on the board of one of our nonprofits we founded in 95 as a board member emeritus. And so even though Medici Project at times seems like, okay, really what is going on now? There's a lot going on because we've shifted some of our efforts into these other areas like urban education. And what do we need to do in our inner city schools differently to reach students and all. So for us, Medici Project, the IT thing has been huge. And even those that may be on the call, they're brilliant. Your students that come, we go around the table and we say, okay, what are you majoring in? I can't even spell those words, much less understand what they're doing, in medical fields and all this other kind of stuff. And so there may be somebody that's going to watch this now or later that says, hey, I'm going to go to your website. I'm going to see what you guys are doing, what you're not doing, and see if maybe we have some suggestions, So I hope that helps, kind of expand a little bit more. But for us, it's just being aware and having the bandwidth to be aware that we don't know some things. Let's talk to some people who might be able to show us what we don't know and don't even know where to begin. And so just acknowledging that you don't know it all has probably been for us a great start in it all.
Thanks, Vince. I think our other question that is in here is, as far as besides financial contributions, what other ways can our participants, our students, our folks who are supportive of our program help to support you all? I think we answered that in one of our previous questions. Did any of you have anything that you want to add to that specifically about things other than financial contributions?
No, other than making sure that we stay in touch.
Yeah.
And I think that this webinar, or whatever you want to call it, it's actually a good step in that direction. I think it's really important that we don't just fade away as a partnership.
Thanks, Randy. I think also, I don't think we said this at the very beginning, but each of you, we have worked with each of you, Buck-I-SERV has worked with each of you in your organizations for a number of years, each of you different times. Do any of you remember off the top of your head what year was our first year with you, Randy? You might be the longest running.
It's almost the history of Buck-I-SERV.
Yeah.
I know they celebrated their 15th anniversary, I think, last year or so, and it was close to that. Our office closed and reopened because of some state budget things back in 2011, but we were well established with Buck-I-SERV long before that. And I think we probably had over 3 dozen groups between Buck-I-SERV and Manners. We've also been working with Manners. which I never can remember exactly what it stands for. It's Multicultural Students in Agricultural and Natural Resources or something like that. But so there've been two groups working with us, and I think we've. I just want to point out I don't think I've ever taken. I don't take them for granted. Whenever we go out to a new group, I look back at what previous generations of Buckeye students have done. Their whole islands that would not be natural habitat here if it weren't for our partnership with Ohio State, because it's very expensive and very tricky as far as, separate out native plants and invasive plants and all to do habitat restoration on islands. So this partnership has, I hope there's been a good service learning component for the students. I think there has, but it certainly has been valuable for our program goals.
Vince, I think you'd be next longest. I can't remember what year. I should have looked and I didn't, but
I think it was around 2006 or 5, somewhere around.
Oh gosh. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, it's been a long time, and I don't know if you remember, but you guys called us because you were planning to be in Atlanta, and the organization that y'all were supposed to be with never called y'all back. And we organized a trip in like 4 days before you guys were supposed to arrive, and we've been partners with you guys ever since.
Don't tape this part, Connor. Can we stop that? That's not a best practice scenario. That was just.
Hey,
but we make it work, right? We make it work.
Anytime you mess with us urban nonprofits, you don't know what you're going to get. You really don't sometimes. And so you just got a bad one at that time. But their loss was our gain. And so literally you guys have grown with us in all 3 of our cities ever since then. It's been a really amazing journey. And you guys have been pioneers along the way, just in new ideas that we would have. Hey, we wanted to go into juvenile prisons. Would y'all be interested in that? And you did, and the students have loved it. And so, it's just a testimony of, of just the DNA of Buck-I-SERV, and all. But I would say that it's been definitely over 10 years, if not, pushing, 13, 14, maybe longer years, So you'd have to go back and take a look at that. But I know for sure it's been that long and stuff. We just try not to screw it up every year.
So that's what's coming, Jeff. Jeff's our newest on the call for sure. 3 years?
Yeah, this would have been our 4th group who joined. She was our first leader that we had out in Baltimore. And in a short amount of time, it just worked out that the first year, the group lined up with Baltimore City Spring Games. And so we said, yeah, okay, that works. And now Baltimore City Public Schools doesn't plan spring games until they know when the Buck-I-SERV week will be. They really, work around any time. I think they changed testing dates in the city for standardized testing based on the Buck-I-SERV week now. So it's been really, really good for our organization. And the 1 year it doesn't rain. This is like the perfect year for a track meet. It's like 70 and sunny in Baltimore, and every other year we get some showers during the week, but it's all good.
Awesome. Well, thank you all so much for sharing, and it's always great to hear about the long-term partnerships that we've been able to form, and we'll look at it again next year, and we'll hopefully be right back with you. So keep it going. This year we'll call it a fluke. We'll circle it back next year. So I did have one final poll for everyone who is still remaining on the chat. I'm just kind of hearing about how you plan to continue being an active citizen during the quarantine. So if you just take a couple seconds and answer that. Okay, great. Sharing the results on that. So some social distance service, definitely some donations, which is awesome for those of you who have the means to do so. And a lot of socially responsible daily behavior, doing those little things that still really matter, even when times are more difficult. So thank you all for sharing that. I just had one final thing. I'm going to share my screen real quick. Just a couple last little things. So, okay, so just a couple of last little resources to share. So one is the We Are Here For You page from Office of Student Life. We know how difficult this time is and how trying it can be. So this page, you just type in We Are Here For You, has a ton of different resources that are still being offered through Student Life, whether that's health and wellness or mental health or financial wellness, all of those things that are resources available for Ohio State students and faculty. So definitely check this out if you're finding things a little more difficult during this time. There's also a socially responsible volunteering during COVID-19 webinar being hosted by Fisher College of Business on Tuesday, May 19th. So I highly encourage you to check that out. We've partnered with Fisher Cares, which is the service arm of Fisher for the past few years on a trip, as well as various other capacities. And so looking forward to kind of hearing what they have to say about that. And then on from student activities side, I mentioned it already, but we're going to be compiling some things for Buck-I-SERV to be able to share out and how to support our community partners virtually. But for those who are a little closer to home or are looking for opportunities here, Pay It Forward also has socially distant service opportunities for some of their local Columbus organizations that we work with. So definitely check that out on the Student Activities website. And then finally, today is Giving Tuesday at Ohio State. So all of the programs here are focused on both support for students on campus, as well as support for the Wexner Medical Center and other health and wellness resources. So if you have the capacity or know someone who might, I definitely encourage you to pass this on. It's so important to promote the work of our peers right now and keep them going during this difficult time. And that is all I have for you today. So thank you, panelists, so much for joining us. This has been incredibly informative, and we appreciate you taking the time out of your day to do that and to share with students and faculty and staff. And thank you all who participated on this call. Like I mentioned, the recording will go up on our website under the go.osu.edu/ our Buck-I-SERV webinars. So you'll be able to find it there. So I encourage you to pass it on to others and hear more about all the work you're doing. But thank you all again, and have a great rest of your afternoon.
Thanks, everyone.